Okay, I want to share with you one of my favorite arguments for the existence of God. And it is an argument from religious experience. Remember, all of these arguments for the existence of God have one thing in common. They're all starting with something that is commonly known or something that is commonly experienced. So, for instance, the cosmological argument starts with the existence of the universe and reasons back to God. The moral argument starts with common objective morality and reasons back to God. This argument starts with the common religious experience um, uh, of certainly not all people, but the common religious experience that has been common to all men throughout every civilization, both in the past and the present. It seems to me that the skeptic or the atheist has to come up with some sort of explanation for why so many people, and really the vast majority of people, seek after God and also claim at least to have spiritual religious experiences. Peter Kreeft makes this argument that many people of different eras and of widely different cultures claim to have had an experience of the divine. It is inconceivable that so many people could have been so utterly wrong about the nature and content of their own experience. Therefore, there exists a divine reality which many people of different eras and of widely different cultures have experienced. And the skeptic has to be able to answer this argument. The skeptic is forced into the uncomfortable position of basically saying that the vast majority of people, both past and present, have been deluded by their religious experience. They have been deceived, they have been manipulated, or perhaps they're just too ignorant to see it any other way. But the person who denies the existence of God has to deal with this common religious experience. And so various arguments have been made, various naturalistic explanations have been made to explain away the religious experience common to men. Sigmund Freud, for instance, argued that religion is just a psychological projection. It's just a psychological projection that we see God the way that we see our fathers, that we project on this idea of God, the authority of our Father. And when we reach a certain age where we rebel against the authority of our Father, we also rebel against the authority of God. So really, according to Freud, God is nothing more than a psychological projection, and a psychological projection to be dismissed. Feuerbach argued that religion is nothing more than wish fulfillment. We don't want to die. We'd like to believe that we can live forever. And so, voila, we created religion as a solution to our problem. We created religion as simple wish fulfillment. I wish to live forever, and so I create a religion where I get to live forever. One of the most elementary problems with this position, though, is that it doesn't explain where the wish comes from. It doesn't. I mean, if we are purely naturalistic beings, if we're purely the byproduct of random and mindless chance, it's difficult to conceive how this desire to live forever would have been or could have been evolved naturally through that process. Lenin argued that religion is nothing more than an opiate for the masses, that religion is propaganda used by the elite, used by the powerful to oppress the workers, to oppress the populace. And so religion is used to deceive people as propaganda by the powerful. Bertrand Russell argued that religion was really a religion of the gaps, and this is a common argument that's made by many of the new atheists, that primitive people invented religion because they didn't understand the world around us. They didn't understand why did it rain during certain seasons and not rain during other seasons. They didn't understand naturalistic processes, and so wherever there was this ignorance, they came to believe that the gods were responsible for these things. The gods were responsible for the rain. The gods were responsible for famine. The gods were responsible for any number of things in our lives that we can't understand or that we can't explain. And as the story goes, now that modern man has become sufficiently enlightened and scientific, we no longer need the hypothesis of God. We no longer need this this God of the gaps. Richard Dawkins, being a biologist, being a naturalistic biologist that he is, needs to come up with some sort of naturalistic explanation for religion. And so what he has come up with is the idea of memes. That a meme is an idea, a behavior, or a style that is spread from one person to another person within a given culture, sometimes called thought contagions. And so according to Dawkins, religion is sort of like a virus. Religion is sort of like a sickness passed down from one generation to another. And that's really where the idea of religion comes from. Daniel Dennett, another one of the new atheists, who has some similar beliefs to Richard Dawkins in this area, says that our beliefs in God come from genetic traits that have been passed down from our ancestors to help us with survival. And so what he essentially believes is religion is a helpful delusion that was brought about through evolutionary processes. That the belief in religion has helped our species to survive all these many years. And because the belief in religion has helped our species to survive, evolution was able to pass these traits down from generation to generation. And so our belief in God is nothing more than genetic traits that help us for survival. And Dennett would go on to say that now we no longer need those beliefs in order to sustain our survival as a species. So religious belief can be cast aside. Well, there are many responses that can be given to this particular challenge, one of which might be offered by Roy Baumeister. Roy Baumeister said that there are 4 fundamental questions that have to be answered convincingly if a way of life is to count as a meaning of life. And he points out that these are not empirical questions which can be answered by the natural sciences. These are questions like the question of identity. Who am I really? What informs my identity? What do I base my identity upon? The question of value. It's one thing to ask, who am I? It's another question to ask, well, do I really matter? Am I valuable? Am I important? Another question is the question of purpose. Why am I here? It's not just a matter of how I got here. It's more a matter of what purpose do I really serve? Do I have a purpose? Do I have a meaning in my life? And then the 4th question is the question of agency. Can I really make a difference? Can I bring about effects in my world? And so his point is that these questions are questions that every single person asks. If you're going to have meaning in life, if you're going to have purpose in life, every single person asks these 4 questions. And empirical science is incapable of offering any sort of answer to these questions. They may be able to describe where we come from. They may be able to describe to a certain extent where we are going. They may be able to describe at least biologically who we are. But they can't really ask these more penetrating and ultimately much more important questions that each one of us ask. For instance, biology might say, well, you are an evolved primate. You are a Homo sapien. That might be how they answer the question of identity, but ultimately that's a very unsatisfactory answer. Ultimately, that doesn't provide me the kind of substance and ultimately the kind of meaning that really makes life worth living. And this is the problem that materialistic atheists routinely run into. There is a limit to which their atheism cannot answer these types of penetrating questions. St. Augustine said very famously, "You have made us for you, and our heart is restless until it finds its rest in you." Similarly, Blaise Pascal talked quite a bit on this particular issue. He said famously that there is a God-shaped vacuum in the heart of every man which cannot be filled by any created thing, but only by God the Creator, made known through Jesus Christ. He goes on to say, "Man without faith can know neither true good nor true justice. All men seek happiness." Now, let that sink in for a second. It's more true than you may first realize. All men seek happiness. There are no exceptions. However different the means they may employ, they all strive towards this goal. The reason why some go to war and some do not is the same desire in both, but interpreted in two different ways. The will never takes the least step except to that end. This is the motive of every act of every man, including those who go and hang themselves. He goes on to say, what else does this longing and helplessness proclaim? But that there was once in each person a true happiness, of which all that now remains in is the empty print and trace. We try to fill this in vain with everything around us, seeking in things that are not there the help we cannot find in those that are there. Yet nobody can change things, because this infinite abyss can only be filled with something that is infinite and unchanging. In other words, by God himself. God alone is our true good. And his point is that we all were built, we are all constructed with this deep desire, this deep longing for happiness. You might substitute the word meaning or purpose. But something that this world just cannot provide for us. And our entire lives are structured along to meet this desire. He also says this: who would think himself unhappy if he had only one mouth? And who would not if he had only one eye? It has probably never occurred to anyone to be distressed at not having three eyes. But those who have none are inconsolable. And his point is this: none of us woke up in the morning ticked off that, oh man, I can't believe I only have two eyes. Or I can't believe that I only have one mouth. Like, none of us give even a thought to this notion. But if we only have one working eye, or if we don't have any working eyes at all, then this is of course a tragedy for us. And his point is, where would this longing within us come from? It can't be considered natural. Natural processes can't give us this sort of deep longing and desire that goes beyond the natural world. So the atheist, or the person who would deny God, has a significant problem explaining how this sort of desire comes about through purely naturalistic processes. You have to speculate. You have to be like Freud and speculate on psychology. You have to be like Dawkins and speculate on biology. Or you have to be like Dennett, who speculates on evolution itself, that evolution has given us this sort of happy delusion. But still, you have to wonder, where does this delusion come from? Another response that might be given is by Czeslaw Milosz, who says that in his response to the idea that religion is just an opiate for the masses, he says, "Religion, opium for the people. To those suffering pain, humiliation, illness, and serfdom, it promised a reward in the afterlife, and now we are witnessing a transformation. A true opium of the people is a belief in nothingness after death. The huge solace of thinking that for all our betrayals, greed, cowardice, murders, we are not going to be judged." Think about that for a second. Which is the true opiate for the people? The idea that there is no accountability, that there is no life after death, or the idea that there is accountability, that there is something more to look forward to. C.S. Lewis puts it this way: a man's physical hunger does not prove that man will get any bread. He may die of starvation on a raft in the Atlantic. But surely a man's hunger does prove that he comes from a race which repairs its body by eating and inhabits a world where eatable substances exist. In the same way, though I do not believe, I wish I did, that my desire for paradise proves that I shall enjoy it, I think it a pretty good indication that such a thing actually exists, and that some men will. A man may love a woman and may not win her, but it would be very odd if the phenomenon called falling in love occurred in a sexless world. Do you get his point? That we have within us, again, this deep desire, this deep longing for transcendence, this longing for God, this longing for something more. Where does such a longing come from? Purely naturalistic processes cannot explain where this longing comes from. N.T. Wright, I think, has a very helpful way of putting this. He says in his book, Simply Christian, he says that there are various echoes of Eden within each one of us that call us towards heaven. There are, he says, there are built within us certain things that they're deep longings of the heart, they're deep longings of our soul, but they are constantly unsatisfied in this world. And he says that these are echoes of Eden. These are remembrances of what we once were and what we will be in the future. The first echo of Eden that he talks about is justice. And his point is simply this: we all have within us a deep longing for justice, a deep longing for things to be made right, for fairness to exist. And we work for justice in this world. But justice in this world is constantly frustrated. We see injustices all the time. Everything from corrupt politicians getting away with their corruption to innocent children starving in far-off places. And we look at that and we say, that's unjust, that's unfair. And what N.T. Wright says is this is an echo of Eden. This is a deep longing that's been built into us, that calls us towards God, that moves us towards God. He also talks about spirituality. It's undeniable that virtually all people that you meet are longing for something other. Now, maybe they use the word spirituality, maybe they don't, but we're all longing for something that is wholly other, a transcendent type of experience, something that connects us with a different reality. And we might call this spirituality. We long for this. We long to be in awe. I think this is one of the reasons why we love going to the mountains or we love going to the ocean. Because when you go to the mountains or when you go to the ocean, you feel that sense of awe, that sense of wonder, that sense of transcendence. Love is the same way. There's something transcendent about love. There's something about love that is wholly other, and we long for that. We pursue that. But in this world and in our lives, we find this pursuit for spirituality constantly frustrated and constantly unsatisfied. And this, as he says, again, is an echo of Eden, calling us back to our original condition and forward to what God has in store for us. Thirdly is community. We long for community. We long for intimacy with people. But we find our desire for community constantly frustrated. Close friends and family move away. Close friends and family die, and so our community is interrupted by death. Sometimes community is interrupted by sin and brokenness, things like gossip and anger and malicious talk. But there are all sorts of things that get in the way of authentic and true community in our world today. But still, we long for this. We long to be connected intimately with other people. And then lastly, beauty. One of the most powerful arguments for the existence of God, I believe, is the aesthetic argument for the existence of God. Where does beauty come from? Beauty is so wonderfully useless. There's no real true use for beauty in our world. But we all long for beauty. We love beauty. So where does this longing for beauty come from? Where does this longing for beautiful music or beautiful art or what have you? Where does this longing for aesthetic beauty truly come from? N.T. Wright argues that this is an echo of Eden. We were made to pursue beauty. And I think this is a powerful argument. This argument that we were made for something else. And mankind, throughout all of human civilization, has worshipped God because in the deepest recesses of our soul, we sense that we were made for something more. This isn't just a God of the gaps sort of spirituality. This penetrates us to our innermost core, that we have this deep sense that there is something more, that there is something else, that we were called for some greater form of happiness and satisfaction than anything that this world can offer. One illustration that I like to share is from the last days of World War II. In the last days of World War II, there was one of the most tragic stories of World War II was unfolding on the Pacific. The USS Indianapolis was sunk by a Japanese submarine on its way back from a mission. And the problem was no one knew that it had been sunk. And so for days, the survivors of this attack were left drifting on the open water without food, without water, and horribly, many of these sailors died because of shark attacks. But the majority of these sailors died actually from saltwater poisoning. They became so thirsty that they decided to drink the salt water around them, which only sped up the process of dying of thirst. And this is a horrible and a tragic irony if you think about it, that you're surrounded by literally millions of gallons of water, and yet you're dying of thirst. And I think that this is a perfect example of where we find ourselves in our culture today. We are surrounded by millions of gallons of water and we're dying of thirst. The Hebrew word for this is hebel. It's the word that's used in the book of Ecclesiastes, often translated meaningless. But it's this idea that something looks valuable on the surface. It looks like it's going to bring substance. It looks like it's going to bring meaning. It looks like it's going to bring satisfaction. The illustration that I use is cotton candy. You know, it looks so satisfying on the outside, but then you put it in your mouth and it evaporates. It's gone. And that's the word that Ecclesiastes uses for everything in this world. Everything he says is hebel. It's meaningless. Whether it's wealth or wisdom or entertainment or women, it's all ultimately unsatisfactory. It's all ultimately meaningless. But yet we take it in. We keep consuming it. We keep taking it in. And just like that cotton candy, we take it in and it makes us sick to our stomach. It doesn't quench our desire. It doesn't quench our hunger. But we keep on taking it in, hoping that something will fill this, what Pascal says is our God-shaped vacuum in our hearts. And nothing truly satisfies. And it's because nothing in this world can ultimately satisfy the deepest longings of our heart. And so this argument for the existence of God takes this appetite. It takes this common religious experience, and it postulates then that this common religious experience testifies that we were made for something, that there is something beyond this world, that there is someone beyond this world who can provide that ultimate satisfaction for our souls that we can't seem to find in this world as it is.